So at the time of Reformation, there were things that were changing, a rebirth and revival in the European Renaissance. And it was the Renaissance period that was going on at this time. And Protestantism began around 1500. That was after Martin Luther put his 97 grievances up on the wall, told the Catholic Church, you're paganistic, and what you're doing with those indulgences and making people pay for penance and all that started the Protestant movement. And that was a time period of Reformation, that now the influence of the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, was now diminishing. And other religions were starting, of Christian religion, starting to grow up. Wesleyanism started, which eventually began the Methodist movement. Calvinism started, which eventually began the offspring of the Pentecostal movement. So you had all this stuff that was going on, that was happening during this time period, that there was changes being made, and that these changes were being presented forth, and the less and less was the domination that used to happen of the Roman Catholic Church under Constantine, of how they had that period that actually plunged the whole world into the Dark Ages. And now coming out, the light is shining. Men are getting the light. They're seeing. They're reading the scriptures for themselves. Finally, the KJV came out during this time, 1641. And you get the KJV, that men now had the Bible interpreted unto them in their own language. So now they could read it for themselves and see, rather than everything being in the lexicon or the Vulgate, which was all written in Latin, so that only the Roman Catholics knew what it said. You know, those that were popes and archdioceses and everything else like that, they were the only ones that could interpret the Bible. You were not to interpret. You're just supposed to listen to the priest, and what they say is what was. Yeah, right. God had touched the heart of King James, and King James went forth to give to the people the Bible at that time. So Reformation was taking place during the time of the Church of Sardis. Well, Sardis was a very, very, very wealthy place as far as its background to in its history. And we read about Sardis was located at the foot of Mount Tmolus. It was the capital of the ancient kingdom, the powerful kingdom of Lydia in the 7th century BC. It was an important Persian city after it was conquered by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century AD. Even though an earthquake destroyed it in 17 AD, it was immediately rebuilt because of its proximity and the amount of wealth that the people had within the city. They were able to rebuild the whole city in order to get it back up and functioning. So Sardis had a lot of wealth that was accumulated there. It started out as the name Sart, S-A-R-T, which was short for Sart Mahmut. Sart Mahmut. which changed October the 19th, 2005. It changed to the name of SART. And I remember Minister Brown saying about going over to Turkey and seeing a lot of these, you know, if he had ever gotten to Turkey, seeing a lot of these cities. A lot of these cities exist today. Like the city Sart is the ancient city that used to be Sardis. So you would see the ruins, you'd see all the stuff there that belonged to this particular city that was still there. Again, under the Byzantine times, it had many things of influence. It was noted as the third most powerful city behind Smyrna and Ephesus. Ephesus was the most powerful, and then Smyrna, and the third most powerful city was considered Sardis. It had become the first city ever with its metallurgists, those are the people who print money, that they were able to separate silver and gold purely. They were the first ever to do this. And this cast a bunch of wealth upon the city, that they could separate pure silver, pure gold. From that time before that, there was always this thing called the electrum, where you didn't know how much gold was in it, and you weren't sure how much silver was in it, because it couldn't be separated. Well, in Sardis, the people who were metallurgists, they dealt with metals. They came up with a way to separate purely gold and silver from any alloys or anything else like that. And so they printed the first pure money of pure gold and pure silver. And this made them heaps and heaps and heaps of money. And that's why they become known as the first place to print modern currency. So that's Sardis. It became the first place ever known to print modern money. Also, they had a gymnasium. And in that gymnasium, that's where they used to work out. And it was also a bathhouse. And they would go to the gymnasium and work out, and then go to the other part of the gymnasium and take a bath. So it was the local bathhouse. Because remember now, at that time, they didn't have inside, unless you were a Caesar, where people brought you water, and a tub was built within, you couldn't afford it. So that's where they would go, to the bathhouse, and that's where they would bathe. So they would go into the gymnasium part, and they would play and run and whatever they did, and then they would go to the back part, and then they would bathe. Well, most of them only bathe once a month. You know, unless you were in battle, then you bathe probably once every 3 or 4 months. Yeah, it's not something of the particulars that we do every day. Maybe some people twice a day, you know, bathe. No, it was a luxury to have water and to have anything of an aqueduct or something that would bring water to you. They would have to go get their water. So they would have people who were servants, slaves, others that would bring their water, boil it, get it so hot, pour it within the tub. And if they were, like I said, the Caesars or some type of centurion or something of that sort, then those people would have an inside bath. But everybody else within the city didn't. So they would go down to the gymnasium, and that's where they would bathe. And somebody would pour some water on them, and they would get some lye, some soap, and they would wash. And then somebody would pour some water on them, and rinse off, and they get out. And then they come back a month or so later, and they do it again. You know? Wasn't the cleanliness of places, but it was okay. They had synagogue. One of the largest synagogues ever excavated was found in that area. And usually synagogues are usually on the outskirts of the city. Well, this one was directly in the middle of the city, which said a lot about the Jews and said a lot about their wealth of the Jews. Because they were so wealthy, they were able to build a synagogue in the middle of the city. Well, that was great, but there was a temple that was also there. It was the temple of Artemis, which is known as Diana by the Romans. She was the daughter of Zeus, the twin sister of Apollo. And she was the goddess of the hunt, the moon, and fertility. So this was also there, and it was twice as large as the Acropolis. It was huge, this big, huge thing, also in the middle of the city, that was built there for them to worship Artemis or Diana. So here you got the Jews with wealth on one side that had the synagogue. Then you had the Romans on the other side that had the temple of Artemis. And then you had the Christians. And they didn't have the wealthiest of churches. They were on the outskirts. But they had a presence there because this was one of the first places that Paul went and ministered, and that they became Christians. But the church that they built was not this big edifice or anything else like that. No. But they had wealthy people within the body. They had very wealthy people that was within that particular body. So let's look at now the revelation that Christ gives to this particular church. Remember, that was always the key thing. What type of revelation, how did Christ reveal himself to this church, to each church? He revealed himself differently to each one. And unto the angel of the church in Sardis write, these things saith he that has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest and art dead. So here's the revelation. Seven spirits of God. Interesting. Anybody know what they are? Jesus said, I have the 7 spirits of God. Because they were referred to as the 7 stars. But he said, I have the 7 spirits. Those were the stars. The candlestick